A message from my son crushed my soul. It read, "Dad, don't even bother coming to the wedding. Shelby doesn't want you there. She says your presence would ruin everything." I froze, the cell phone in my hand, reading and rereading those words as if they were a direct blow to the chest. At that moment, I had the transfer receipt in my pocket. It was the last $22,000 I had saved up through sacrifice over 2 long years. My name is Jake Riley. I'm 76 years old, and I'm from Phoenix, Arizona. Before I detail my story about the sacrifice and ingratitude, take a moment to drop a comment about where you're connecting from. And please, hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this intense family drama unfolds. If this story resonates with you, support me with a like and subscribe to the channel. Here, there's a new story every day, and maybe one of them will resemble yours. I worked as an electrician since I was young. I spent my whole life climbing poles, fixing wires, enduring the scorching sun, and more than once receiving shocks that left me trembling. I was never rich, but I was always a hard worker. I married young and had only one son, Ethan. He was my pride. Everything I earned, I invested in getting him the best I could. New notebooks for school, shoes when the old ones wore out, a simple gift for birthdays. Over the years, Ethan grew up, and I became a widower. My wife, Marilyn, passed away more than 15 years ago. Since then, my life revolved around my son. When he met Shelby, I tried to accept her with a smile, although from the beginning I noticed her eyes looked at me with a certain disdain. A hearty girl, always talking about trips, luxuries, and the life they dreamed of. With my worn shirt and my hands full of scars, I never fit into the world she wanted. But Ethan was in love, and I didn't want to be a burden. I repeated to myself that she would accept me over time, that if I tried a little harder, I could earn her respect. That's why when he told me he was getting married, I felt a deep joy. I thought, finally, I'll see my son start his own family, and I can help in some way. That's when I decided to gift them the honeymoon they mentioned so often, a trip to Miami Beach, the place of their dreams. I didn't have substantial savings. I lived on my pension and some odd jobs I did in the neighborhood. But for 2 years, I saved dollar by dollar, even going without medicine sometimes, all to gather that amount that would allow them to fulfill their dream.
The week of the wedding, Ethan sent me the hotel account where they were going to stay. That day, I woke up early, put on my straw hat, and walked to the bank. I took a ticket, got in line, and waited patiently. My cell phone was ready to confirm the transfer. My heart was beating hard, but it was a beat of excitement. I imagined my son's face when he received the news. But then the phone rang. A message. I opened it, and there it was. "Dad, don't even bother coming to the wedding. Shelby doesn't want you there. She says your presence would ruin everything." I felt a current run through me from head to toe. Not an electric shock of the kind I knew so well, but a direct blow to the soul. I stood still as the line moved forward, unable to move. I thought about the 2 years of sacrifices, every dollar saved, every simple meal I accepted just to save. All for what? To be excluded from the most important day of his life? In my pocket, I had the transfer slip. Only a click was missing, but my fingers didn't move. Instead, I opened the app and canceled everything. In that very instant, I blocked my own son's number. I put the phone in my pocket, took a deep breath, and walked out of the bank without looking back. I didn't cry there, no. I walked through the streets of Phoenix with my head held high, but inside, a storm was tearing me apart. When I got home, I sat in the rocker on the porch, and then, yes, the tears came pouring out. It wasn't just sadness. It was sadness mixed with relief, because deep down, I knew the time had come to stop humiliating myself. As I watched the cloudy sky, memories of when Ethan was a child flooded back. Once he fell off his bike and broke his arm. I spent 3 full nights in the hospital, sitting by his side, sleepless, holding his hand. And now, so many years later, he was telling me that my presence would ruin his wedding. Life deals hard twists. But that night, I made a decision. That money would no longer be for them. It would be for me, to start living and thinking about myself for the first time in many years.
What I didn't imagine was that this cruel message would be only the beginning of an even greater storm, because Ethan and Shelby would not settle for a no, and what came next was lower, dirtier, and more painful than I could have foreseen. That night, I barely slept. I stayed in the rocker listening to the distant hum of cars on the avenue and the intermittent barking of a stray dog. Ethan's message kept repeating in my head over and over, like an echo that wouldn't leave me alone. "Dad, don't even bother coming. Shelby doesn't want you there." They weren't just words, they were knives, because behind every syllable was the confirmation of something I had already felt deep down for a long time. I no longer mattered to them. I woke up with swollen eyes, but with a firm decision. That money I had saved for 2 years was not going to end up in the hands of someone who despised me. That money was going to be for me, to start a new stage, even if I didn't yet know what I would do with it. The next day, the first thing I did was go to the bank. I asked to speak with the manager, a young man in his late 30s named Mark, who had always treated me patiently. I told him calmly, "I want to lock down all my accounts so that no one, even by mistake, can move $1 without my authorization." He looked at me in surprise, but didn't ask much. He prepared the papers, offered me coffee, and within minutes everything was sealed under lock and key. I left the bank feeling lighter, as if I had dropped a backpack I had been carrying for years. But deep down, I knew that wouldn't be enough. Ethan wouldn't stay quiet, nor would Shelby. People like that, accustomed to getting everything their way, do not accept a no without fighting back. And I was right. That same afternoon, as I was fixing some bulbs in the living room, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. I answered out of habit. On the other end, Shelby's cold voice. "Mr. Riley, I'm calling because Ethan asked me to. He's worried. He says he hasn't received the transfer for the honeymoon yet. The package expires tomorrow." Her tone was dry, almost commanding.
For an instant, I felt my hand tremble, but I took a deep breath and answered slowly, "Shelby, listen carefully. There is not going to be any transfer, and tell my son that if they keep insisting, I'm going straight to a lawyer." There was an uncomfortable silence. She took a few seconds to react. Finally, with that cynical tone that always characterized her, she said, "All right, Mr. Riley, you'll know best. Just don't complain later about being the culprit for ruining the most important moment of your son's life." And she hung up.
I remained seated with the phone in my hand, still hearing the click of the call disconnecting. That was the last time I spoke with her, but not the last time they tried to break me. 3 days later, while I was having sweet rolls with strong coffee on the porch, the phone rang again. This time, it was Ethan. I didn't answer. A message immediately arrived. "I don't know what's wrong with you, Dad. People are saying you're losing your mind. If you don't fix this, I'll have to look for another way." For the first time in weeks, I let out a bitter laugh, not of joy, but of resignation, because reading it made me understand something clear. That was no longer the boy I carried in my arms when he was sick. He was a cold, calculating man, willing to humiliate his own father just to get money. That's when I made the decision to seek legal help. I went to see Mr. Damien, an older lawyer recommended by a neighbor. I told him everything from the beginning, hiding nothing. The man listened patiently and told me in a firm voice, "Mr. Riley did well to cancel that transfer, and what we are going to do now is armor your assets. No one will be able to move anything without your authorization. And if your son tries anything, we will have plenty of evidence to stop him." I left the office with the first spark of calm in my chest. Finally, someone was telling me that I wasn't crazy, that what I was doing made sense. But the calm was short-lived. 4 days later, I was having coffee on the porch when I heard a car park in front of my house. It was Ethan. He came with that fake smile that never reached his eyes. "Dad, we need to talk," he said from the gate. I crossed my arms and replied without moving from the porch, "Speak from there, Ethan. You don't need to come in." He tried to keep his composure, but his voice was trembling with rage. "What's wrong with you, Dad? I already made commitments. The agency, the hotel, you can't just block everything like this." "That's your problem, not mine," I replied without hesitation. Then he dropped the mask, hit the fence with his hand, and raised his voice. "Are you seriously going to do this after everything I did for you?" I looked him in the eyes and answered dryly, "What did I do for you, Ethan? It was always the other way around. Every time you looked for me, it was because you needed something." He was silent, red with anger, until in a whisper loaded with venom, he said, "If you don't want to fix it the easy way, I'm going to do it the hard way. I'll talk to a judge. I'll say you're not well in the head anymore, that you can't handle your money, and then we'll see who decides." That day, I understood how far he was willing to go. It wasn't just contempt. It was a direct threat to take what was mine, to declare me incompetent in order to seize everything. I stood motionless, feeling the heat rise through my veins, but I didn't raise my voice. I only replied, "Try whatever you want, Ethan, but don't forget that I'm still your father." He didn't expect that answer. He looked at me with fury, turned around, and left without saying goodbye. That same afternoon, I went to see Mr. Damien again. I told him, word for word, about Ethan's threat. The lawyer listened with a frown and told me, "We're going to get ahead of them. Tomorrow, we will file a notarized affidavit and a medical certificate of your sanity. With that, any attempt at legal interdiction will fall apart in seconds." And so we did. The next day, I had all the papers signed, every document laminated and saved in a blue folder. For the first time in a long time, I felt proud of myself, proud of not allowing myself to be humiliated anymore. But Ethan didn't stop. 3 days later, I received a court notification. he had initiated a process of legal interdiction alleging that I no longer could manage my assets. What Ethan didn't know was that I had already foreseen everything. When I received the court notice, my hands trembled. The mailman handed me a thick envelope with my full name, exact address, and official seal. As soon as I opened it and read the first lines, I felt a weight in my chest. There it was, written in cold, formal letters. My own son had requested my legal interdiction, arguing that I no longer had the mental capacity to manage my assets. I remained seated on the porch, looking at the open paper on my lap. I didn't cry, I didn't despair, but inside, the rage boiled. How was it possible? How could Ethan, the very child I cared for all night when he had a fever, now accuse me of incapacity?
It didn't take me long to react. I put the documents in a folder and went to Mr. Damien's office early the next day. When he saw me come in with the envelope in my hand, he already guessed what I was bringing. He opened it slowly, reviewed each page, and when he finished, he looked up and said in a firm voice, "Mr. Riley, this is not just a lack of respect. This is fraud. Your son is trying to strip you of everything. But don't worry, you already have the notarized affidavit and the medical certificate. With that, this attempt will not prosper." His words calmed me, but not entirely, because one thing is to have documents in order, and another is to face the public humiliation of a judge asking you if you are truly in your right mind. I barely slept that night. I remembered so many things, like the time Ethan lost his first job, and I covered his expenses for 6 months, paying rent, electricity, and even groceries. Or when he bought his first car, and I helped him with the down payment. I never demanded anything from him, and now he was paying me back with lawyers, false papers, and the intention of declaring me incompetent. The hearing was scheduled for a week later. Mr. Damien told me not to worry, that he had already prepared the defense with all the necessary documents, but I couldn't avoid the anxiety. Every morning, upon waking, I checked my blue folder over and over again with the laminated papers, the medical certificate, the notarized affidavit, the receipts for my expenses. I wanted to have everything perfect, as if that would give me strength. On the day of the hearing, I got up before dawn. I put on my best shirt, a dark blue button-down that I kept only for important occasions. I also ironed my slacks and polished my shoes until they shone. It wasn't vanity, it was dignity. I wanted the judge to see me for what I am, a conscious, hard-working man, capable of fending for myself. Mr. Damien was waiting for me at the entrance to the courthouse. He shook my hand and said, "Relax, Mr. Riley. You just have to answer calmly. The documents will speak for themselves." We entered the room together. The air conditioning was strong, and the sound of the fans gave me goosebumps. In front of us, seated at the table, was the judge in his black robe, and on the other side were Ethan and Shelby. Seeing them there was a hard blow. Ethan avoided my gaze, but Shelby held hers with that haughty gesture I knew so well, as if she had already won the battle.
The judge opened the hearing with a solemn voice. "We are here to review the application for interdiction filed by Ethan Riley against his father, Jake Riley." Hearing my name like that, as if I were an accused man, shook me. But I stood firm. Ethan's lawyer spoke first. He argued that I was no longer in a condition to manage my assets, that I was forgetting things that put the family's wealth at risk. He even presented witnesses who claimed to have seen me disoriented in the street, people I didn't even know. Lies invented to tarnish my name. When it was our turn, Mr. Damien calmly stood up, opened the blue folder, and began to present the documents one by one. Your Honor, here is the notarized affidavit where Mr. Riley expresses full awareness of his actions. Here is the medical certificate issued by a specialist confirming his mental lucidity, and here are the receipts for his expense management that clearly show he keeps his accounts in order. The judge took each document and reviewed them seriously. I watched him from my seat, with my heart beating fast, but my head held high. Then came my turn to speak. The judge asked me if I knew why I was there. Of course I do, Your Honor. I am here because my own son wants to take what is mine by inventing that I lack mental capacity. But I am still the same man who worked 40 years as an electrician, who raised his son with sacrifices, and who now only asks for respect. My voice came out firm, without hesitation. I saw Ethan lower his head and Shelby bite her lips. The hearing continued for almost an hour. Finally, the judge spoke clearly. After reviewing the documentation and listening to Mr. Riley, this court determines that the petition for interdiction is hereby dismissed. Furthermore, I refer the case to the district attorney's office to investigate possible falsehood and fraud in the declarations presented. At that instant, I felt immense relief. I didn't jump for joy, I didn't make a fuss. I just closed my eyes for a few seconds and breathed deeply. Justice. That's what I had just received. As we left, Mr. Damien put his hand on my shoulder and said, "You see, Mr. Riley, the truth always comes to light. Now, let's prepare the criminal complaint against them." I nodded silently. I knew the battle was just beginning. Ethan and Shelby wouldn't stop because of a court ruling. People like them always find another way to attack.
That afternoon, back at home, I sat on the porch with a strong cup of coffee. I looked at the orange sunset sky and thought about everything I had experienced in those weeks. I had gone from being a father willing to sacrifice his savings for love to becoming the target of a cruel betrayal. And the worst part was that it didn't come from a stranger, but from my own son. As I sipped my coffee, I made a promise to myself. I would never again allow them to trample on me. That stage of enduring in silence was over. From now on, every attempt by Ethan and Shelby would be answered with the truth, with documents, with dignity. What I didn't know was that they would not settle for the failure in court. The next blow would be even lower, and this time it would put at risk not only my assets, but also my reputation in the entire neighborhood. After the hearing, I thought things would calm down. The judge had rejected the interdiction request and had even ordered an investigation into possible fraud. I felt that I had finally regained some control over my life, but I was wrong. Ethan and Shelby didn't stop. On the contrary, they doubled down on their attacks, and this time it wasn't in court, but in the neighborhood, in daily life, where it hurts the most. The first sign came one morning. I was on the porch having my coffee with a roll from the corner bakery when I received a call from my neighbor. Paulie was an older man I had known for years, a construction worker, always direct. "Mr. Riley, are you okay?" he asked in a serious voice. "Yes? Why do you ask?"
Well, because they're saying nasty things about you, Ethan and his wife. They're saying you're not well in the head anymore, that you're spending money wildly, that you're even giving away what you have. I was speechless for a few seconds. I felt my blood boil. It wasn't just in court now. They wanted to destroy my name in front of my own neighbors. "Thank you for letting me know, Polly," I replied calmly. "Don't worry. I know what I'm going to do." I hung up the phone and stood there thinking. They knew that everyone in my neighborhood knew me as a hard-working, serious man who never owed a dollar. If they managed to tarnish that image, they would have succeeded in isolating me. And that was what hurt me the most, betrayal disguised as public shame.
I didn't stand idly by. The next day, I went to the notary and drafted a formal statement with my certified signature, making it clear that I was in full possession of my faculties and that any rumor to the contrary was false. But I didn't stop there. I also made a more personal decision. That afternoon, I sat on the porch in front of my cell phone camera and recorded a video. It wasn't highly produced. It was just me in my plaid shirt, sitting in my rocker, talking straight to the camera. "I am Jake Riley, 76 years old. I am here in my home in Phoenix, perfectly conscious and taking care of my life as I always have. I want my neighbors and friends to know that I am still the same as always." I sent it to all my WhatsApp contacts, my closest neighbors, my old co-workers. It wasn't to justify myself. It was to make it clear that I was not going to remain silent. The following days were strange. On one hand, I felt the weight of the gossip in the air. The lady at the tortilla stand looked at me strangely, as if she hesitated to greet me. Some kids who used to ask me for help with their homework now passed by. But I also received messages of support. Old colleagues who told me, "Jake, we saw it clearly in your video. You're still the same old man." That support gave me strength, and at the same time made it clear to me that Ethan and Shelby would not stop. People like that, when they lose in one area, look for another to keep attacking. And so it was. A week later, while I was reviewing some accounts at the kitchen table, I heard 3 loud knocks on the gate. When I opened it, there were 2 men in suits, with clipboards in hand. "Good afternoon. Are you Jake Riley?" one asked in a neutral voice. "Yes, I am. What can I do for you?" "We are from the credit department of the National Bank. There is a financing registered in your name, and we need to confirm some data." I felt my stomach clench. "Excuse me, gentlemen, I have not requested any financing." They opened the folder and showed me documents. There was my name, my address, even my ID number, and a false, poorly executed signature, like a mockery. And below, as a reference contact, Ethan Riley.
I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Gentlemen, that signature is not mine. I never applied for any credit. If you want to verify it, here are my documents." I led them to the kitchen and showed them my ID, my papers in order. The men looked at each other uncomfortably, made a couple of quick calls, and finally, one of them said, "Mr. Riley, sorry for the trouble. It seems to be a case of fraud. We'll investigate it." When they left, I didn't waste 5 minutes. I grabbed my straw hat and went straight to the police station. I was attended by a veteran policeman named Leander. I told him everything calmly: the forgery, the threat of interdiction, the rumors in the neighborhood. He listened without interrupting, and finally said, "Mr. Riley,
What you're experiencing is more common than you think, but most older people keep quiet. You are doing the right thing. We are going to file a report for attempted fraud and ideological falsehood. I signed the complaint and left with the receipt in my hand. I felt proud of not staying silent, of defending my name as I should. Upon leaving, I went directly to Mr. Damien's office. When I told him about the false financing, he frowned and said, "This is no longer just a family matter. This is a serious crime. We are going to move it to the prosecutor's office." And so we did. That same week, my blue folder filled with more documents. A copy of the complaint, proof of my accounts, medical reports. Every sheet was like a shield against the attacks of Ethan and Shelby. The nights were tough. I had trouble sleeping because every time I closed my eyes, I heard my son's voice telling me I was crazy, that he was going to take everything from me. But there was also a new fire inside me. I was no longer the resigned man who waited in silence. Now I was fighting with the truth in hand. One Saturday morning, while I was sweeping the patio, I received another unexpected visit. They knocked on the gate with 3 soft knocks, different from the previous ones. I opened it and found a face I hadn't seen in over 10 years. Arnold, an old friend from my electrician days. "Jake, I came because I heard something and I couldn't keep quiet." I let him in and served him coffee in the kitchen. After a few loose words, he revealed the truth. "I'm working at a law firm, and I saw some documents that gave me a bad feeling. They're in your name, but they're not yours. They're forged papers, property inventories, asset transfers, and everything points to Ethan and Shelby."
I was silent, looking at the bottom of the cup. I knew it. Deep down, I always knew it. "Are you sure, Arnold?" "I saw it with my own eyes, Jake. I even heard a guy from the notary's office say it was to expedite the interdiction process for the old man who no longer knows what he's doing." That confirmation hit me like a bucket of ice water. They were no longer suppositions. It was proof that my own son was willing to falsify documents to take what was mine. I accompanied him to the door and thanked him with a handshake. As soon as he left, I grabbed my blue folder and headed back to Mr. Damien's office. He listened to me with a serious face and, without wasting time, called a colleague from the prosecutor's office. "This is now swindling and forgery. We are going to file a complete criminal complaint." That night, sitting on my porch again, I felt that I was no longer alone. I had proof. I had a trusted lawyer. I had my dignity standing firm. And although I knew that the worst was yet to come, I also knew that this time they wouldn't catch me off guard. The days following Arnold's visit were a mix of apparent calm and constant alertness. I would get up early, make my coffee, sweep the patio, and sit on the porch as always. But inside me, there was a silent tension. I knew Ethan and Shelby wouldn't stop. That silence after the complaint was too strange, too calculated. I didn't have to wait long. One Friday morning, just as I finished watering the plants, I heard the dry slam of the gate again. This time it wasn't neighbors, nor was it collectors. They were 2 men in light suits wearing credentials hung around their necks. "Mr. Jake Riley?" "I am," I replied.
"We've come to deliver a court notification. You need to sign for receipt." They handed me another thick envelope with an official seal. I took it with steady hands, although I felt a knot in my stomach. I signed the acknowledgment of receipt and closed the gate. I walked slowly toward the kitchen table, opened the envelope, and began to read. What I saw chilled my blood. It was an urgent court order freezing all my bank accounts. The justification was absurd. Financial risk to the family, possible inability of the account holder to manage his assets. Exactly the same discourse as Ethan and Shelby, but this time with a judge behind it. I sat there for a long time with the document open on the table. I didn't cry, I didn't shout. I just took a deep breath and repeated to myself, "This is war." I didn't waste time. I grabbed my blue folder and walked to Mr. Damien's office. When he saw me enter with the envelope in my hand, he stopped what he was doing and received me in the waiting room. "Let's see, Mr. Riley, what happened now?"
I handed him the notification. He read it calmly, but when he finished, he looked at me seriously. "This is no longer a simple family dispute. Now we are talking about legal abuse, a blatant attempt at dispossession. And if they managed to get this order, it's because they presented false documents. But don't worry, we will respond." That same afternoon, we worked for hours. Mr. Damien called a trusted doctor to renew my mental health certificate. He also prepared a written opposition, attaching every laminated document I had so carefully kept: the notarized affidavit, the fraud complaint, the previous medical certificate. When I left the office, night was falling. I walked through the streets of Phoenix with slow steps, watching the lights of the street stalls and listening to the distant music of a mariachi playing in the plaza. And although it hurt inside, I also felt firmness. I was not going to let them take what was mine. The next day, I appeared in court accompanied by Mr. Damien. We carried all the organized documentation. The judge who had signed the freezing order was different from the one in the first hearing. A younger man, more rigid, with a stern gaze. "Your Honor," Mr. Damien began, "we have come to present clear evidence that this precautionary measure lacks foundation. Mr. Jake Riley enjoys full mental capacity, as demonstrated by these medical and notarial certificates. Furthermore, there is an ongoing complaint for forgery of documents in which the applicants, Ethan Riley and Shelby Lopez, are directly involved." The judge took the documents and reviewed them one by one. He looked at me over his glasses and asked, "Mr. Riley, are you aware of what is happening here?" I straightened up in the chair, took a deep breath, and replied without hesitation, "Of course, Your Honor. My son and his wife want to take what belongs to me, but I am still the same man who worked 40 years as an electrician, who raised poles under the sun and never failed to pay a bill. And here is the proof that I am neither crazy nor incapable." The room fell silent for a few seconds. Ethan looked at me with rage. Shelby with that cynical smile I knew so well. The judge closed the file and said, "Very well, we will review these proofs and issue a resolution shortly." I left the courthouse with my heart racing, but my forehead held high. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Ethan and Shelby had resources. They lied shamelessly, and they didn't care about tarnishing my name.
But I also knew that I was no longer the submissive man of before. The following days were a waiting game. I continued with my routine, although with the money frozen, everything became more complicated. I couldn't withdraw cash, I couldn't pay my bills normally. I had to resort to the small cash savings I kept in a drawer. One afternoon, while I was at the neighborhood store buying beans and bread, I heard two women murmuring behind my back. "They say Mr. Riley isn't well anymore, that his son is looking after him because he spends money on nonsense." Oh, what a sadness, right? A man who worked all his life, and now this. I didn't turn around. I didn't say anything. But those words pierced me like knives. The legal attack wasn't enough. Now they wanted to kill me alive, destroying my reputation in the community. That night, sitting on the porch with the radio off, I thought about everything I had experienced. Ethan's betrayal, Shelby's humiliations, the lies in court. And I understood that I couldn't stay on the defensive alone. I had to respond with the truth, with proof, with firmness. I called Mr. Damien and told him, "Attorney, I no longer just want to defend myself. I want to go on the attack." He was silent for a few seconds and then replied, "That's exactly what I was waiting for you to say, Mr. Riley. We are going to formally sue for ideological falsehood, swindling, and moral damages. It's no longer just a defense, it's justice." And so we did. The next day, we filed the complaint with the prosecutor's office. We delivered copies of all the evidence, the falsified signatures, the attempts at bank fraud, the malicious rumors. Everything was recorded in official documents. As we left the prosecutor's office, Mr. Damien put a hand on my shoulder and said, "This is not won in one day, Mr. Riley, but believe me, every document we are presenting is one more wall that stops them. And sooner or later, that wall will be so high that they won't be able to climb it." I slept a little better that night, not because the war was over, but because I finally felt that I was not alone, that there was a clear path, that I was fighting on the right side. What I didn't know was that Ethan and Shelby, seeing themselves cornered, would prepare an even dirtier blow, something that would not only affect me, but would put everything I had built in my life at risk. My name, my house, my peace. And that blow would arrive faster than I imagined.
The calm I had felt after filing the complaint was short-lived. One morning, while I was sweeping the patio with my old broom, I heard the 3 dry knocks on the gate again. I approached with the premonition that something bad was coming. When I opened it, I found 2 court officials. One of them, young, barely looked up as he spoke. "Mr. Jake Riley." "I am," I replied. "We bring a notification. You need to sign for receipt." They handed me another thick envelope. I took it calmly. I signed my name and closed the gate. I walked towards the kitchen with the envelope in my hand. I opened it slowly, like someone who knows there are no good tidings inside. And there it was, a provisional order requesting the foreclosure on my house, arguing that my assets were at risk of dispersal due to administrative incapacity. I sat at the table looking at the walls I had built with my own hands more than 40 years ago, that roof that had protected my wife Marilyn until her last days, that patio where Ethan played as a child with a plastic ball. And now my own son was asking for it to be foreclosed, as if I were a stranger, an old man mentally incapable of taking care of himself. I didn't cry, but I felt a deep pain beyond any physical injury I had sustained in my life as an electrician.
Because losing money is hard, but trying to snatch your house, that is tearing out your soul. I took a deep breath, poured myself a strong coffee, and dialed Mr. Damien's number. Attorney, I just received another notification. Now they're going after my house. From the other side, I heard a brief silence, and then his firm voice. Calm down, Mr. Riley. That house has been registered in your name for decades. No one can touch it without your consent. We will stop this. That same afternoon, we met in his office. I showed him the documents, and he reviewed them patiently. Look, Mr. Riley, this is a dirty move, but it has no legal foundation. They are trying to take advantage of any loophole to put pressure. We will respond with an immediate appeal, and, furthermore, now we will indeed file the lawsuit for moral damages, because what they are doing is not just fraud, it is public humiliation. I nodded silently. I had no tears left, only a firm determination not to yield. The days that followed were tense. Some neighbors, misinformed by the gossip that Shelby had sown, began to look at me with suspicion. A lady commented loudly when I passed by the store. What a sadness! So many years working and now he doesn't even know what he's doing. I didn't stop to respond, but those words hurt me like few things in life, because it wasn't just my son who was turning his back on me. Now it was the neighborhood itself, the people who had watched me grow, work, and age.
One night, while I was sitting in the rocker with the radio off, a memory of Marilyn came to me. She used to tell me, "Jake, respect is not begged for. It's earned every day. And when someone tries to take it away from you, you have to defend it tooth and nail." That phrase stuck in my head, and I decided that's what I was going to do. The next day, Mr. Damien accompanied me to the courthouse to file the formal opposition to the foreclosure. We brought everything: the original deed to the house, current property tax payments, proof that I had lived there for 40 years. The judge received the folder, reviewed it, and set a hearing for 1 week later. That week was the longest of my life. Ethan didn't call me, nor did Shelby. The silence was total, but a heavy silence, like a storm gathering on the horizon. I continued with my routine, getting up early, watering the plants, preparing beans, but every time I saw the walls of my house, I felt a mixture of pride and fear. Pride because I knew what it had cost me to build it. Fear because my own child wanted to take it away from me. On the day of the hearing, we arrived at the courthouse early. I wore my well-ironed blue shirt, the same one I wore to the first hearing. Mr. Damien accompanied me with his briefcase full of documents. When we entered the room, Ethan and Shelby were there again. She with her haughty smile, he avoiding my gaze. The judge began the session with a dry voice. "We are here to review the application for a preventive foreclosure on the property located at..." He mentioned my full address. I felt a chill. Ethan's lawyer took the floor with a theatrical tone. He said that I was no longer in a condition to manage my assets, that my wealth was at risk, and that the family only wanted to protect it. He presented copies of forged documents, contracts I had never signed, and even testimonies from alleged acquaintances who claimed to have seen me lost in the street. When it was our turn, Mr. Damien stood up calmly, opened the folder, and presented every true document: the original deed to the house, the current property tax payments, the notarized affidavits, everything in order, impeccable. "Your Honor," he said in a firm voice, "this attempted foreclosure has no basis. Here is the proof that Mr. Jake Riley is the legitimate, conscious, and capable owner of his property.
Furthermore, there is already a formal complaint against Ethan Riley and Shelby Lopez for the forgery of documents. What they seek here is not to protect, but to dispossess. The judge listened in silence, reviewed the papers, and looked directly at me. "Mr. Riley, do you have anything to add?" I stood up with a trembling but firm voice. "Yes, Your Honor. I built this house with my own hands, brick by brick, working under the sun and the rain. I raised my son here. I cared for my wife here until the last day of her life, and now that very son wants to take it from me. I will not allow it." The room fell silent. Ethan looked down. Shelby pressed her lips together. The judge sighed and said, "Very well. The court will take all the evidence into account and will issue its resolution in the coming days." We left the room with our hearts in our throats. There was no immediate ruling, but we knew the evidence was on our side. That afternoon, back at home, I sat in the rocker and looked at the tin roof that still remained from the first room I built. I felt pride. Pride for not giving up. Pride for defending what was mine. But I also knew that Ethan and Shelby would not stop. Every defeat would make them more dangerous, dirtier. And what came next confirmed it. Because if before they had tried to defame me in the neighborhood and seize my house, now they would seek to destroy the only thing that still sustained me, my dignity as a man and as a father. And that attack would be the lowest of all.
The days following the foreclosure hearing were strange. The judge had not yet issued the resolution, but I knew the evidence was on our side. However, Ethan and Shelby did not remain quiet. It seemed that every defeat made them more ferocious, more willing to sink me by any means. And this time, they didn't come with papers or lawyers. They came with something much worse. The poison of gossip, of defamation. One morning, as I was going to the corner store to buy sweet rolls, I overheard two neighbors talking in low voices, but loud enough for me to catch every word. They say Mr. Riley isn't well anymore, that he signs papers without realizing it. Yes, that he's even giving away his things. Ethan is worried. They say the poor old man has gone crazy. I felt a punch in the stomach. They didn't even realize I was behind them with the bag of bread in my hand. I didn't say anything. I walked back home with slow steps, as if carrying a huge stone on my shoulders. But the rumor didn't stop there. That same afternoon, I was called by Rita, a lifelong neighbor, a simple woman, who sometimes came to help me with cleaning. "Mr. Riley," she told me with a pained voice, "I don't know how to tell you this, but Ethan and Shelby are going around saying that you don't even know who you are, that you're spending all your money with people who are deceiving you." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. "Thank you for letting me know, Rita. Don't worry. I know how to respond." I hung up and looked at the ceiling of my house, remembering the words of my late Marilyn. "Respect is not begged for, Jake. Respect is defended." That night, I made a decision. It was no longer enough with notarized affidavits or medical certificates. I had to look people in the eyes and tell them the truth. The next day, I recorded a new video. This time, I sat in the rocker, the sunlight illuminating my face. I spoke slowly, looking directly at the camera. "I am Jake Riley. Some of you have known me for decades. I have worked as an electrician all my life. I have paid every bill. I have helped neighbors. I have raised my son with the little I had. Today, I want to tell you something. I am still here, lucid, conscious, with my life in order. Don't believe the rumors. I know who I am, and I know what I have. I sent that video via WhatsApp to all my contacts. I also asked some friends to share it. In a few hours, it was circulating in the neighborhood. Some neighbors sent me messages of support. Others approached me to greet me on the street. But I also knew there were those who preferred to stick with Ethan and Shelby's version. I confirmed it a few days later. I went to church on a Sunday morning, as I always did, and upon entering, I felt eyes fixed on my back. Some greeted me warmly, but others barely bowed their heads with suspicion. The poison of gossip had infiltrated even in that place that had always been a refuge for me. Back home, I sat on the porch with a heavy heart. I thought about Marilyn and how she always found a way to cheer me up. And then I remembered another of her phrases. Jake, the truth takes time, but it arrives, and when it does, it shines brighter than any lie. I decided I wouldn't give up. That same Monday, I went with Mr. Damien and told him what was happening in the neighborhood. He listened to me with a frown. Mr. Riley, what they are trying to do now is break you emotionally. They want you to feel alone, isolated. But don't worry, we are already preparing the lawsuit for moral damages, and these rumors only strengthen it. I nodded, but deep down I knew the wound was already inflicted, because fighting in a courtroom is one thing, and feeling that your own neighbors doubt you is another.
The court's final ruling, dismissing the foreclosure attempt and formally rejecting the interdiction petition, wasn't just a victory, it was a reckoning. The judge's decisive dismissal, accompanied by the continued investigation into Ethan and Shelby's forgery and fraud attempts, finally shattered their calculated web of deceit. Jake Riley stood firm, his dignity intact, while his son and daughter-in-law faced the prospect of legal repercussions. The legal war was over, but the emotional circuitry had been permanently damaged. Jake won his house, his money, and his reputation, yet he lost the one thing he had always invested in, his son. The $22,000 was safe, but the cost was the irreversible solitude of an empty nest. Sitting on his porch in Phoenix, the heat finally lifting with the sunset, Jake realized his final, most difficult act wasn't the legal battle. It was the decision he made the day he canceled the transfer. He had secured his legacy, not for his lineage, but for himself. He had proven that a man's worth is not defined by his savings, but by his sanity and his spine. He looked at the empty seat beside him. The house was finally and completely his again, but the silence inside was absolute. Jake had defended his life, but he walked away with the profound, chilling realization that his life, as a father, had ended the day his son chose greed over respect. The old electrician, Jake Riley, had successfully cut the wires to a toxic past, dedicating his remaining days to the single, uncompromised circuit of his own self-respect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more real-life experiences about sacrifice and ingratitude. Thank you for listening, and remember, dignity and competency are not granted. They are fiercely defended with documentation and vigilance. Never hesitate to cut toxic ties, even with those closest to you. Drop a like,
Share this story with someone who might need to hear that message today.